Welcome to another Do Not Falter Battle Lounge with the 2MK team. Quick sound test, of course, but never know whether or not it's working. There we go. Though I'm not actually going to be the one talking so much on stream today, I'll be talking mostly through this first match. You'll get most of the backup information about what's going on today from RuneSiren herself. But as for my role, I'll hop in if there's other players playing, but there's a good chance you're going to see, given the current flow and popularity of the game, it's just going to be Grappler versus Launcher for most of the evening. We're not expecting too many other joiners from our usual suspects, and I'm not planning to play for very long, if at all, though I will of course be here for the purposes of having the stream. If you would like to join in, this is our LA lounge, which means if you have a good connection to people on the east coast of the United States, or generally are anywhere near the Atlantic Ocean and have really good connection, you can assume that the rollback or whatever else will handle it for you. So you should be able to get good matches with us if you want to. Well, good from the perspective of whatever it is we're capable of doing in this game. We are definitely still focused quite a lot on our accuracy and, in this case, matchups. But as always, our stream will be going for probably about an hour. The lounge itself will probably close after that if no one else joins it. So if you want your chance, you might as well hop in somewhat early. I remember to set it so that there's only 2 arcade machines active today, so you shouldn't have too much trouble getting matches, although probably again not with any of us unless you jump in on the main one. My presence will therefore be unpredictable overall. But there's likely to be at least 1 or 2 things that I have a reason to jump in and note, particularly while our players are focused on their actual match play and not on talking. But with even the end of this specific round, I'm out for now.
And now I might be audible. Alright then. Good evening everyone as well. I am your glorious launcher player. And I am not quite recently anymore back from our East Coast Throwdown tournament that I went to, well, at the beginning of the month. While I was there, I got to get a few of the matchups that I don't have as much experience with in DNF. One of those is Grappler. I have obviously fought IndigoWuulfe before, just in these lounges. But I haven't necessarily gotten to fight him quite enough to have a good feel for how to handle this matchup. At least not before. When I was at East Coast Throwdown, I ran into another Grappler player who went quite a few sets with me, helping me figure out the matchup and try to figure out how to get through, deal with, handle the Grappler's ability to use some of his armored moves to really give Launcher a bad day, simply on the basis that I have exactly 2 lows. One of them is that and doesn't... it's limited. And one of them is a very punishable slide. So since lows are the way to defeat that armor, it gave me a bit of trouble. Nikolai had... IndigoWuulfe has been giving me trouble with that armored stuff in the past as well. And I never quite got where I needed to get with it. I obviously got quite a bit of practice, as I mentioned, over the tournament, and as the matchup evolves between us today, I'm hoping that I can finish the job, because I only really got about halfway there. So talk about more about that between matches. And for now, you can just watch to see where we're at. I do wonder where he gets these rocks from. Particularly at sea. Now, Launcher's basic pressure is straightforward. I get the 5 AA into either Stray AMR, I don't remember the names of the different bazookas super well, the basic bazookas, or into that slide. The problem is that I kind of need to keep that up to keep Grappler out of my space, and if he gets close to me, he can be quite a bit of trouble. But as you have seen, he's able to dodge through, can just do that to my DP on reaction with certain moves if I am foolish enough to actually go with them. And he can use his MP, I believe, charged armor moves to go right through a lot of stuff, including, I think, that forward fire, mana fireball. But I'm not really sure. I think that was more a timing issue overall. Once he's close, I'm in for a world of hurt. And while I doubt Nikolai has been spending quite as much time on training those specific aspects in question, I can lose easily 60% life off a single throw loop combo against a grappler who has enough health. What this ended up reducing the gameplay to, and as a whole, was that I would need to be basically at max range for that flamethrower, 2/3, 3/4 of the screen, and correctly either use it to interrupt the very early startup of the armored screen crossing move if he did start to charge that, or I would need to be ready to react with slide if he decided to come in or get a little bit closer to start his stuff. Being wrong in either case on the timing would mean that he would get through and begin his 60-70% damage combo on me. Which is par for the course. But the thing that makes me feel like I didn't necessarily have all of the answers against that particular grappler that I fought at the tournament is that if the grappler messed up, I would get 15% of a health bar off of him. And if I messed up, he would get 60 to 70% off of me. So I figured there must be something I'm missing. And it left me with the hope to come home to some long sets with IndigoWuulfe himself and see if I couldn't figure out what I was missing from either his style being a little different or simply helping him level up and getting him the practice to continue to push on me. Either way, we win more or less. So my suggestion for IndigoWuulfe is basically that data. I am relatively weak to well-timed that move, actually, and well-positioned. And it's sort of a mix-up for me, because if I pick the wrong option and he uses that at the right timing and spacing, or he moves correctly and then uses that and such, I don't have an opportunity to change my plan. And he'll just go through whichever one I used. So that's a starting point. I can't say if it's the red or green version of the tackle that's required, but I remember eating a lot of red tackles during those sets. However, despite the state of the game, it appears that we do have another player in our lounge, so we may not be just this long set today, and have something else to break up the experience. That's what happens when I try to roll through. And as you see, unless I time that correctly, he's going straight through it. Whoops. I would consider the grenade to be very useful here, but unfortunately, actually, that grenade is not a low, so once we get to a certain stage of the matchup, that's all there is to it. Unfortunately, since this is the first time I've fought him after said tournament, I haven't exactly been able to give IndigoWuulfe a lot of practice catching up in that regard. So that's probably where we're at now. But either way, someone wins. And now you get to see what happens once he gets in on me, or at least a little bit of it. First time I've ever seen that outcome from that. The timing and spacing on it is a little precise, but once you got it down, geez. One other thing that I learned is that if Grappler uses some MP on the opening, either the up kick or I think possibly the charge, basically my only safe option for the round opening is jump back A, jump back instant A. which will stop anything, but doesn't let me necessarily get much started. Or at least anything that I've seen so far. Maybe Nikolai will show me something interesting. And that move right there, the one with the blue with the air up flip, the MP version of that seems to be loopable for quite some time if you do it correctly. Shing, and I'm down. IndigoWuulfe is in fact starting to get the hang of this, based on the comparison between my two experiences, the one just now and the one that I had earlier. And as he does so, I'm going to have to refine a little bit from my slightly more general, normal, shall we call it, standard playstyle, to the slightly more focused version that targets mainly just these things. Until, hopefully, he gets good at taking me out, and I finally start to understand what it is that I need to add to that to give myself a better chance. Now, one might think that, well, stop spamming your 5AA a little early if you notice I'm doing something. But unfortunately, even the first hit takes just long enough that it doesn't help in the end. At least in my experience thus far. Unfortunately, the forward roll on round start is not one of the options that requires me to retreat. just outside my own awakening, huh? Well, good policy if one can do it intentionally in any case. Since my own awakening is basically the one way I can get more than 15 or 20% damage off of slide that I'm aware of. See, one of the other problems is that you can, as launcher, get more off of your slide if you are able to use conversion. But if I have the fight life to be able to convert against Grappler, I'm already in very bad shape. So it doesn't come up as often. By the time I have enough control of the situation to even be able to start, my white life is gone. I started it too late. The other problem, of course, being that a failed slide puts me right into the death zone. And so there you have it. Time for me to step up. Unfortunately for him, this time he did give me Awakening, which would have meant that if I could land a hit, he was going to lose, but he did manage to prevent me from getting the hit, so. Part of the problem was I continued to autopilot the straight AMR version of the combo rather than slide version. Which is a thing that I was starting to work on switching over before ECT. But I'm not necessarily all the way there. And that was a spacing problem, I think. My DP should not beat that if he is in range when he does it. That might be an effective retreat if I put myself in the wrong spacing, but it also might not. We'll have to find out as we proceed. I'm not convinced it gets me quite far enough, but it could be the start of a plan for that. Gotta use the red version of that, apparently. I don't remember if the red version will beat my DP directly, but I feel like it gives me more trouble than the green version does in terms of trying to anti-air it that way.
This comes right back to our discussions before about accuracy, as a lot of this matchup is very dependent on it. Grappler really does embody the character archetype that he's named for, as it's all about getting that one hit that no one else is expecting you to get, or technically getting close enough for the one grab that no one is expecting. However, it's a little bit easier to manage things like immaculate spacing when your opponent can't necessarily move all that much. There is a point, however, that always comes up against zoners. Understanding when you should actually be moving away rather than toward. Grappler doesn't actually have to worry about this as much as others, thankfully, because he never really wants to move away for any length of time. But he should consider one specific aspect of this. There is a spacing at which walking forward would cause you to get hit by her 5A, but standing still would not. And in this situation, it's almost always safe to go for a jump. It usually must be an empty jump, but he's also good at doing things to hang in the air. So over time, you can build up the experience of when the opponent is likely to try to do that whole thing to keep you in position, but can't afford to do it as easily. This is not going to come up very often. It's by nature not supposed to come up very often. Your other options are way better for the position, most of the time. But if you feel as if your opponent is going to let you dash at them, you're never going to get close enough in one shot anyway, so there's a lot of situations where the idea is, I'm going to dash, and because I've dashed here, it's now time that I could jump. Which is really important to think about. And this is one of the few times where you have to consider, as Grappler, whether or not it's worth going back or at least neutral jumping. Once in range, it's much easier to be somewhat explosive. And since the matchup doesn't really cause Grappler to need too much from the side of his actual awakened state, a lot of what you're thinking about in the same space is related to that. The better your spacing gets, the harder the launcher's job becomes, but only if launcher's goal is to keep you out, which honestly isn't that heavy a part of the matchup. The main thing that the launcher side has to understand is the opponent can't necessarily get all the way to you in one motion, so you have a little bit of time and freedom to move around if you need to. What you usually can't do very well is attack, because if you attack, you've slowed yourself down and put them in a better position most of the time. But it looks like we're going to get a break from that specific matchup, or at least one bit of a break for it. I'm not sure that this player is actually going to play Grappler Mirror, but nope, here we are. And in some ways, this might actually help a little bit. Because watching two grapplers try to engage at the same ranges that we were just talking about may be a little bit clearer for our launcher to understand why the certain ranges matter. If one watches carefully where these two players choose to move rather than attacking, it can help you understand. While the pauses in their flow would technically be a good thing from Launcher's perspective because it means she can hit more buttons, do more things. This isn't necessarily going to matter if it forces her into a loop of doing things because of the feeling that the opponent will otherwise move. Sometimes that is a big deal, and sometimes it's not. One of the hardest things about playing full screen footsies, particularly with characters like Grappler who go through things, is that you have to spend more time learning not only to watch your side of the screen to figure out how long your moves will reach, but if you've got moves that reach very, very far distances, you shouldn't need to care as much about that at all. Some people like to glance at their opponent's movements first and then their own, but it's usually easier in my personal experience to look at your own position, and then once we've become pretty clear on it, look for your opponents. And two grapplers fighting is 90% that. I was so expecting that to get countered. You see it here, lots and lots of very precise, okay, I'm moving now. Not just immediate movement, but a lot of specifically thought through movement. Similarly, noting that while this player does backdash quite a lot, it's not explicitly for the purposes of just retreating. They are retreating in order to get the freedom to set up the position the way they want to. And you can do this in the launcher matchup as well, but you do spend more time being at risk of having to deal with whenever she actually does put something in front of her. Depending on when your backdash timing is, though, you can jump over whatever that is, dodge through it, and so on. It's not getting you closer, but it will throw your opponent's rhythm off, at least a bit. So now we have a separate grappler with a specific way of flowing. And we are in fact getting the grappler match. But I'm not a launcher, so I can't give you all of the information here. That said, I think it's probably easier on our launcher player to focus on what is actually happening. And I'll just note anything that is specifically flowing one way or the other from either side. Similarly, Launcher actually, once the Grappler player has shown that they can move around correctly, often needs to backdash herself if she has the option to, simply because she will get outmaneuvered otherwise. Round start is usually a good time to do this just because it makes your situation a little bit easier, but jumping also works. The other problem, of course, is that Launcher functionally just gets tired faster than Grappler does. That, for that example, was a moment where were I a launcher player, would have thought, wait a minute, this spacing is wrong. If I hit anything, I'm probably going to die. There's no button that she hits at that point where this is a good idea, because he'll either not do anything and you haven't gained much, or he's going to get past you somehow. And you don't want this. There's a lot of situations like that where you want to move forward very slightly. And then this one where you're just bat dash because anything else is problematic. But if you find yourself using the flamethrower, it's not that using the flamethrower itself is bad. If you didn't move before it, and you don't feel the need to move after it, chances are you're going to die. One of the two should happen. If you didn't move before the flamethrower, try to make sure you move after it. Because at this point, at least, Grappler has to use a lot of energy, use a lot of noticing what will happen, and isn't absolutely sure whether you're going to attack or not. The options available to him are often quite punishable if he intends to go through Launcher's attacks in some way. And while she doesn't necessarily get massive conversions off these things, it's kind of helpful. One thing you could probably do, and almost always get away with it, from a long-range, successful flamethrower, particularly one that knocks down, if you've actually got enough meter, you can probably launch the nuke. But this isn't going to necessarily turn into a thing where you get to do as you like because you've done it. It just prevents your opponent from being able to stand there. Here, for example, is a good place to try it simply because the opponent can't reach you as easily, and if you're in the air, you probably don't have to worry about as much. But now that the match is over, I'm off again and leaving it to our launcher to note anything that she perceived, observed, or experienced in that whole match.
And hello again. What a match it was. That was a bit of evidence of the sort of thing that I was discussing that I was facing earlier. And the things that Rillian was mentioning are basically sort of what I needed to consider more so. I was tending to get myself, as I recalled, then and somewhat just now, caught in positions where I was stuck animating a button that it wasn't a good plan, and I was just getting nailed, not because I was in a bad position exactly, not because I was just going to get hit exactly, but because I was caught myself animating and wasn't supposed to be, more or less. And so some of the minor details about moving around the flamethrower makes sense. I didn't think to use the nuke after the flamethrower because of how the matchup kind of got reduced in that singular experience based on just the process of getting there. Having different sessions and multiple attempts at learning things, particularly against different players, obviously, does help with unjarring that a little bit, or unsettling that a little bit, and letting you work at things around that, as does having someone who can point out to you what it is you need to do. The Grappler not being able to quite reach you immediately is the other important part of this that I was starting to notice when fighting IndigoWuulfe. Because I remembered that from that match that he was mostly just always able to reach me, or always able to arrange to be able to meet me. And I think that in retrospect, that was probably me being a little off-spacing and tired at that day, combined with what Rillian was explaining relative to those moments of quiet, more or less. It's easy to, for me at least, get on tilt sometimes thinking that I need to prevent an opponent from moving or from doing something, even if technically I know that's not necessarily actually the case. And obviously, in this matchup, it's very easy for Grappler to take advantage of that with me. So I think where I'm at now, other than continuing to consider and absorb that, is a bit of needing to get my speed up to some degree relative to it and recognize the situations better as a part of that. So that I can start to have the proper responses to, oh, you got partway in, or noticing when I need to not act or need to reposition instead.
This is something that we mentioned so much across all games relative to zoners, but we don't often talk about it from the zoner side. The opponent retreats in order to prevent a specific bad situation where they just get locked into attempting to come forward and being checked out of it because they're just frustrated, they don't want to have to deal with whatever's happening. But from the perspective of the zoner, you have to understand that if you do this too much, you'll find yourself facing off with people who've trained in one way or another to deal with the problem. If you keep on hitting buttons to keep them out and they get entirely out of the way, you're now back to a specific type of neutral that is almost possible to get yourself on tilt with. These matches don't really need to be either fast or a lot of work. Whereas if you do mess up, your health is usually going to disappear very fast because it has to be allowed to do that. Your opponent won't really have any options if that wasn't how it worked. But you notice it here. Adding even bits of movement makes life a little bit easier in that way. But just understand and somewhat trust, your opponent is no more confident in exactly what they should do than you are. As the zoner, the only way your opponent can become confident is if their moves are very, very fast, or if you have started to follow a rhythm that they've figured out how to beat. Beyond that, you can often just stand there and be completely safe because they don't actually want to attack. They don't want to push that hard and then suffer. This is particularly true because this game's accuracy requirement means that just messing around in neutral, for characters like Grappler in particular, often means that you don't actually get the full combo you were expecting to get in the first place. So it's best to give yourself a break between attacks. Anytime you don't think that it would be impossible for your opponent to get in, chances are they have some plan like that. Sending out the big cannonball is basically reactable to Grappler as far as I know. It's not that this is a bad idea, but if you've gotten your opponent to the point where they're thinking about it, and you're far out, that's probably the last move you actually want to do. And this is partially the reason why we bring up things like throwing the nuke out, because if your opponent was far enough that this was a concern at all, that you couldn't figure out how to reach them, a grappler character almost always is without a way to do anything about it. You're not necessarily going to hit them with it, but if they don't react properly, you've now created a space behind them of something dangerous. In fact, if you're far enough away, you can just put the space in front of them because it's not targeted necessarily on the person. So there are many situations in which you could backdash and then do it, or expect them to backdash and then do it. Whereas the grappler player is watching for the backdash but can't necessarily reach you. In this game, grappler is slightly off the space for doing it, I think. But even if not, the nuke is one of the things that deals with almost all of grappler's actual I'm powering through now options. So you don't really get all that freedom after all. We are coming toward the end of our stream though. And since these sorts of things normally take a while before players are used to it enough to get what they're trying to get out of it, there's probably not that much more to cover on this stream. If you need Grappler practice, feel free to jump in. You probably are going to be able to get at least some for another half hour. You can even ask the two grapplers to split. If you can defeat one, you face the other, and so forth. Another accuracy issue, unfortunately. Still, overall, this has been exactly what was intended for today's stream, so we'll thank Black Hanma for showing up and adding all this content. You are, of course, welcome back anytime. Tomorrow you can join us for our Street Fighter V Mishmashing Battle Lounge. It might be Mix and Mash tomorrow, but I'm not really holding out on that because there's no specific way to tell who's going to be available just yet. The empty jump into throw, but actually gets beaten this time. We have no bots to help you get better at this game. You're just going to have to increase your accuracy with one of the others. But there's lots of anime-ish games that you can come from to get your accuracy up. Be that Dragon Ball FighterZ, Under Night, In Birth, Melty Blood, Type Lumina. All of these we have at least some bot available for. And while unfortunately most of them don't save bots between inputs, we've been working pretty hard on making sure they're easy enough to input in themselves. You can find all of those bots at our website 2-mk.org, and information on our upcoming streams for games such as those, usually our Tuesday Melt and Wednesday Night in Birth, on our Twitter 2_MK_FGC at 7:30 Eastern during the week. But this has been Rillian along with Kansuki Dynasty, also known as RuneSiren. And that's all for tonight. Good luck with your training and good night, everyone.